Conservative caucus, Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks. Good to be with you, Kate.
Of course. So this morning we now have, I guess, what we can call the parameters emerging of a potential deal in the Senate, essentially reopening the government, funding the government, and raising the debt ceiling through early next year, which also reopens the opportunity for negotiations on a broader budget deal with a couple health care elements, Obamacare elements in there. What do you make of this? Can you support these details?
You know, the details keep changing by the day. There were about 2 deals over the weekend that seemed close, and then it seemed like Harry Reid blew them up at the last minute. So we put 20 different proposals on the table to keep the government funded, to address the problems with the health care law, and to extend the debt ceiling. So far, we haven't seen the president willing to accept any of those. So, you know, the Senate does, but one of the things we really want to address as we work to get the government open and extend the debt ceiling is just apply basic fairness. You know, the president has exempted over 1,200 groups, including members of Congress, from the health care law. One of the things we're saying is let's make the law apply to everybody equally. Don't give special backroom deals to one group. Don't exempt members of Congress, of all people. Make members of Congress have to comply with this law.
So I need to push you on this because we are up against a deadline, and people need to start having opinions because it's go time at this point. You've got some details emerging. We talked to Senator Pryor earlier in the show, and he said he's very confident that the Senate and the president will have an agreement by at some point today. We have some of the details right here. With what you hear me saying, can House conservatives support those details?
Well, so far, we've, like I said, put 20 different proposals on the table. We want to see what they come out with. Again, there were 2 different plans that we heard were going to pass over the weekend, and neither did. So, we've learned that, whatever we hear the Senate might be getting ready to do, many times they end up doing something different. But we're willing to get the government open. We want to get the government open. We've been working for 2 weeks now, in many cases with bipartisan bills in the House, and it seemed like each time we had a deal close, the president or Harry Reid backed away. So hopefully they get something done this time that actually starts addressing our country's spending problems so that we can get the economy moving again. We've been willing to work. We've been offering to work for 2 weeks now. Let's get this done.
So, Congressman, what has to be in any deal for you and other House conservatives to support it? If you can't tell me that you can support the details that are coming out, or you can't have an opinion on the details coming out in the Senate, what needs to be in there to get your support?
Well, clearly on the debt ceiling, to get anything long-term, we want to get a long-term deal that starts addressing the nation's spending problems. The debt ceiling is basically you've maxed out the credit card, and when the president comes and says he wants to get a new credit card to spend more, we've obviously been very concerned, saying let's address these spending problems.
Right. Congressman, you know very well, you've been in the House, you know very well that you are not going to get an agreement on the long-term drivers of our long-term debt and deficit issues in 3 days.
And that's why
what you need to agree to is something now.
When we met with the president on Thursday at the White House, we had an hour-and-a-half meeting with the president, and we said, look, let's get a short-term extension on the debt ceiling because we're still not at a place to get a long-term debt ceiling, but we need to have some talks. We finally have to get an agreement from the president to even sit in the room and start negotiating on a long-term deal. The president wouldn't even agree to that. So hopefully the president's willing to finally agree to start negotiating to get long-term solutions so that we don't have this crisis-to-crisis moment. One thing we don't want to see is just another patch where a couple of weeks later we're in the same spot again. The president's going to have to agree to sit at the table and start negotiating on the long-term issues. Like I said, we've been saying this for 2 weeks. We're ready to do it. The president has still yet to even agree to start negotiating our differences. So the ability is there to get a deal, especially short-term and long-term.
So am I hearing that you say some kind of a trigger? You could agree to some kind of a short-term deal if there was a trigger to actually sit down and talk about the bigger budget issues.
Right, and that was what was put on the table with the president at the White House on Thursday, was not even getting into any details, just saying, Mr. President, just agree you'll start negotiating over these long-term issues so that we can get a short-term extension. He wouldn't even make that agreement on Thursday. He still hasn't made that agreement today. At some point, the leader of the free world's got to be willing to sit at the table and be a part of these negotiations.
A couple quick questions for you. Senator Pryor, earlier in the show, he said that in the Senate they want 70, 75, even 80 votes in the Senate to put pressure on the House to pass what they send over. Does that kind of a vote count in the Senate impact your vote?
Ultimately, we've been focused on solving the problems, both short-term and long-term. So, let's see what the Senate does. They've tabled about 18 of the bills we've sent over so far. It'd be nice if they pass something. And We're going to be looking at the details, but we've put a number of options on the table, too. We want to get this done.
How likely is it, do you think, that John Boehner is going to have to put a bill forward on the floor that you cannot support because he's going to have to get something done?
You know, I can't speak for what Speaker Boehner is going to do. We're going to have a conference
this morning. So what's your message to him in the conference?
We're going to talk about that. You know, obviously, you know, he's been working to try to get a deal, and we appreciate the work he's been doing to try to get this resolved. And you know, we're not there yet, but we're still working. And you know, we're going to get it done before before the clock runs out. But we're going to keep working.
You think we're going to get it done before we hit the debt? Do you think there is going to be a vote in the House on something that will pass and get to the president's desk and he'll sign it before we hit the debt ceiling on Thursday?
Yeah, and we've already put that kind of deal on the table to say, look, let's just extend the debt ceiling and keep these talks going and you know, ultimately start solving these problems to get our economy back on track and addressing all the things that are holding families back. And that ability's there. Again, the president's got to be willing at some point to be a part of getting these problems solved.
All right, we'll see if House conservatives, House Republicans, and the Senate and the President can get on the same page in the next couple days. Congressman Steve Scalise, your voice is going to be important in the next couple days. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks. Great to be with you, Kate.
Of course. Chris, over to you.